Hello friend. I want to tell you about the Opel Astra car. When looking for a relatively cheap and young car that will generate low maintenance costs, it is hard to resist used Opel models. Especially when it comes to those from the C segment, and in this category the Astra H is one of the most popular cars on the market. A huge advantage, of course for the manufacturer, was the wide range of body styles. Apart from the traditional station wagon and 5-door hatchback in this segment, it is worth mentioning the 3-door, which had a completely different line. Some call it a coupe. What's more, there was also a real coupe called twin top with a folding, rigid roof. Later, a relatively elegant sedan version was added with the largest boot in the range, with a capacity of 525 liters. And then there's the Zafira, which is supposedly a different model, but technically it's an Astra. All cars have a classic compact design. None of them were offered in a 4x4 version. The suspension is a simple design with a torsion beam at the rear, the last of its kind in the Astra. The shock absorbers and springs are separated, which makes servicing easier. It is worth mentioning that the OPC version and some more powerful ones, with supercharged petrol engines, had shock absorbers with variable damping force IDS+. They are much more expensive than regular ones, but also much more durable. Engines. The range of engines is huge. If we distinguish the power versions of one engine, there are about 20 engines in total. The most popular are petrol engines, naturally aspirated 1.4, 1.6, 1.8 and diesel 1.7 and 1.9. Petrol engines start with the unpopular 1.2-liter version with 80 hydrogen phosphide, but in fact the basic engine in the range was 1.4 with 75 or 90 HP. This is a good, proven source of power, the only drawback of which is the lack of torque. Its maximum value is 125 Newton-meters. The 1.6-liter engine performs much better, generating 105 HP in the naturally aspirated version, and 115 HP in the newer version, while in the turbocharged version it generates 180 HP. This is one of the most popular engines in the Astra H. The 1.8-liter unit with 125 or 140 HP is no less popular. Even the weaker version is an excellent source of power for the Astra, because it generates a solid 170 Newton-meters of torque. The largest engine in the range, the 2-liter turbo petrol with power from 170 HP to 240 HP in the OPC, is also not very popular. Apart from the turbo engines, practically all of them could be ordered with the Easytronic automatic transmission. Diesels are Isuzu and Fiat designs. The 1.7 CDTI engine is Japanese, which was modernized by Opel over time, until it finally became an Opel engine. It came in two versions, simple and slightly more complicated. The 80 horsepower version is a unit without a dual mass flywheel and with a fixed geometry turbocharger. It does not offer good performance, but low operating costs. It is also not very popular. The same cannot be said about the more powerful 100 and 125 HP versions. The Fiat 1.9 CDTI engines are definitely more sought after. These are two versions, 120 horsepower, durable and economical, and 150 horsepower, dynamic, durable, economical and slightly more expensive to service. There is also a 1.3 CDTI engine with 90 horsepower, which provides better performance than the weakest 1.7 diesel, but this design is not entirely suitable for the Astra. What's broken? Let's start with engines and focus on the most popular and, in my opinion, most sensible versions. We'll skip the very rare supercharged versions of petrol engines. The 1.4 starter engine is a design that is hard to have any reservations about. It is the best in the Casa and, from the point of view of operating costs, the best in the Astra. The only thing that can happen in it is excessive oil consumption, but it is not particularly troublesome, and it is perfectly suited to work with a gas installation. The same problem is also experienced by other petrol engines, especially the 1.6 engine. Unfortunately, as in many cases, oil consumption is due to neglect. 30,000 kilometers between changes has left its mark on many engines. In addition, using the wrong oil can finish them off at a mileage of around 200,000 kilometers. Fortunately, replacing the piston rings is usually enough to restore the engine, but few users decide to do this. After such a repair and changing the oil in accordance with good quality, there is no longer any question of excessive wear. The failures that can recur in this engine also include jammed flaps controlling the length of the intake manifold and cases of the timing belt breaking. This is also the result of neglect, because the belt needs to be replaced every 90,000 kilometers, while in a similar 1.4 engine there is a chain. Users may be misled by this. Interestingly, the 1.4 and 1.6 engines are very similar in design, which were factory-equipped with gas installations. Factory-equipped such versions were slightly different heads. The 1.8 petrol is an engine that not only offers better dynamics, but also slightly higher durability. Unfortunately, it can also be affected by the problem of engine oil consumption, and in addition, it has more troublesome electronics. This engine has problems with sensors, the control computer and ignition cassettes. In addition, there are throttle valve failures, but it tolerates driving on gas well. Unfortunately, in the face of multiplying minor problems with electronics, it is difficult to honestly recommend even the 1.8 engine for LPG to people who do not take care of their car. Why? Because mechanics do not always diagnose the problem correctly, and if the gas installation is involved, there may be even more sources of uneven engine operation. The accumulation of problems destroys the engine, which after some time is difficult to get right. Of course, assuming that we have a good mechanic, a good installation that has been properly installed and we take care of the car. The above comments are untrue and it can be assumed that all petrol engines of the Opel Astra H tolerate driving on LPG without any major problems, and certainly better than, for example, the competing Ford Focus 2. In addition, despite the general discouragement of installing the 1.6 unit, in practice, if you take proper care, there are no problems with gas operation. Even the lack of hydraulic valve clearance adjustment, which some versions of the 1.8 engine also do not have, does not interfere with this. It is worth mentioning that for 1.6 engines some companies recommend lubrication, which is not a bad idea. If you take care of the correct valve clearance before installing the system, it usually does not need to be set for a long time, provided that the system works properly. Now let's move on to diesels. Of course, the 1.9 CDTI unit deserves the highest praise, which, although not without its faults, turns out to be one of the cheapest engines in this class to repair. Especially the weaker 120 horsepower version. The more powerful, 150 horsepower one has more problems with the intake control flaps, but there are no astronomical expenses here either. Virtually all diesels, but also petrol engines, have smaller or larger problems with the EGR valve. After driving 100,000 kilometers, it is worth replacing the timing belt. The injection system deserves praise, as it withstands very long mileages. Of course, it is not difficult to expect typical diesel ailments in worn-out engines. The 1.3 CDTI engine is slightly different. It does not have much power or reliability, although it is not a bad unit. The DPF filter often fails. This is the most common ailment of this engine. In addition, you need to check the oil level, because its low level not only threatens seizure, but also accelerates the wear of the turbocharger and timing drive, due to the poor operation of the tensioner. Watch out for the dual mass flywheel, which can quickly fail if used incorrectly. Bad reviews are still circulating about the 1.7 CDTI engine, which actually has little in common with the older DTI designs from old Opels. It is an engine like all diesels in the Astra H with a common rail injection system, i.e. basically devoid of the troublesome power supply system. Despite everything, there are problems with the fuel pressure regulator, and the turbochargers are not as durable as in Italian engines. Another problem that can even destroy the engine is a poor seal of the oil pump, which spits oil onto the timing belt. You have to remember to replace it regularly, and also check it from time to time. If you see oil on it, you have to deal with this issue as soon as possible. Unfortunately, some of the 1.7 CDTI engines were equipped with a DPF filter, and here, unfortunately, Opel did not show off the quality of this element. The cheapest to operate, but also the least enjoyable, is the 80 HP engine. Generally, the 1.7 CDTI units are less dynamic and less cultured, and certainly more expensive to operate and repair than the 1.9 CDTI. As for the remaining elements of the Astra H's construction, there is nothing to complain about. The suspension and brake system are durable. The only major fault may be a failure of the power steering module, which is electro-hydraulic. The suspension is repaired for pennies, provided that it is not an IDS system. The brakes, when using the appropriate replacement procedures and good quality parts, very rarely require any financial outlays. Vehicle electrics have their good and bad days, mainly engine accessories. Other things to complain about include failures of the CIM module under the steering wheel, which manifest themselves in a steering wheel sensor error and faulty operation of the indicator and wiper levers. Virtually any of the electronics failures can be a symptom of a failure of this module, even immobilizing the car. Another, quite typical problem of the Astra H is the seizing of air conditioning compressors. Cars don't rust, but you can look for signs of corrosion in hard-to-reach places, especially on the exhaust system and under the floor. One of the critical places is the decorative strip on the boot lid. Under it, there are foci. Although the Astra H is generally well protected against corrosion, many imported, often post-accident cars repaired for sale, spoil the statistics in this regard. The durability of the interior materials can be assessed as very good, and their fit as average. Unfortunately, in some copies, individual elements fall off, including the air conditioning knobs. The lights are also a critical point. Water collects in the rear ones, while the front ones become very dull. The Opel Astra H, although it has reliability issues, is generally a car that does not generate high maintenance costs. Repairs are relatively cheap, and there is no shortage of Opel specialists in our country. The spare parts market is also very well developed, and most of them are available immediately. In terms of operating costs, the Opel Astra is one of the best cars in its class, in this age range, especially when it comes to younger models. Of course, although the Opel Astra H may be perceived as a boring and bland car, as well as clumsy, it is actually a good choice due to its solidity and costs. The station wagon version, appreciated for its practicality and nice silhouette, is a particularly good solution. Compared to the more modern designs of competitors that already had newer generations of their models, after 2010 it is difficult to find a car of this class that would generate such low operating costs. Thanks for listening to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know of any problems with this car that I haven't mentioned, be sure to write about them in the comments.
I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what brakes and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro.